Week 3, Part 2. 5.1 Rewind and Reflect. 5.2 Outlining the Literacy Narrative. 5.1 Rewind and Reflect. You have practiced the skills related to reading, annotating, summarizing, and responding, and now you will continue to develop the connection between these concepts in the story of your relationship with literacy and the impact specific text and experiences have had on you. While your literacy narrative should display both structure and meaning, another goal is simply to reflect on your relationship with reading and writing as you embark on this new phase of your life and your learning. So don't forget to leave time and space to enjoy the memories of how you got to where you are and who you have become. Sitting still with our thoughts can be surprisingly difficult. Sometimes our worries and fears can start to take over and make us focus on all the things we could be doing instead of sitting and thinking. Looking back can also stir feelings of sadness, so allow yourself to sit with a range of emotions. Sitting with joy and pride can also be uncomfortable, but allowing yourself to reach reconciliation can be worth sitting in discomfort. In Watershed, Amy Ray and Emily Saylor suggest that every 5 years or so, we should look back on our lives and have a good laugh, which is good advice. We all have a few TBT memories that make us laugh a little and cry a little. But remember that your focus is on looking at the role literacy played in your stories. It may seem like an exaggeration, but taking the time to pause and think can be the most important thing we do for our assignments and for ourselves. Without zooming out a bit and getting meta, we can't really see what is going on, which means we usually have less agency or power over the outcome. And after we zoom out to see the big picture, we can zoom in and get a close look at ourselves. These skills that we apply to ourselves in our lives also apply to how we read and absorb and digest and understand the world around us. Like reflection, focus and concentration are especially important when it comes to learning. Focused concentration impacts our personal and professional lives, and it can be developed. Stated specifically, learning about learning can impact your ability to learn, and learning about your learning will impact your ability to learn effectively. Thinking about thinking, or metacognition, is also an important element of having a say in your thinking. An important goal of ENC 1101 and of the literacy narrative is to learn about learning and think about thinking, and learn and think about your life and your learning and thinking. With so many options and distractions, our minds can become trained to bounce from thought to thought and lead our actions from thing to thing. Agility in action and thought are important too, but not being able to slow down and switch to a single pointed focus can limit our ability to do deep work and achieve deep learning. Developing practices of sustained concentration and contemplation develop competencies like perseverance, resilience, and conscientiousness that serve as the foundation for success in learning in nearly all areas of life. So for this assignment, the goal is to sit and to think. To prepare for this assignment, pick a time and place where you can spend some uninterrupted time with your thoughts. Hopefully the assignments you have submitted so far have helped you start to think about your story and what you will want to include or exclude. Read the questions below to help guide your trip down literacy lane. You can either read through all the questions first and then read them again to think of an answer to each, or you can read each one carefully the first time and think of an answer before moving to the next question. A useful way to get the most out of each would be to jot down notes, which will also prepare you to answer question 1. What is literacy? What is your definition? What are other definitions? What kinds of text do you read? On what do you read? Where do you read? About what do you read? When and why and whom do you read? Does the text you read usually have audio or visual components? How many text or digital messages do you read and write daily? With whom do you exchange these messages? How often do you mix your reading with writing? What kinds of writing do you do? When, where, and to whom do you write? Why do you write? On what do you write? What do you write and write about? When you think of reading for school, how do you feel? Nervous, excited, annoyed, confident? When you think of reading as part of communication with friends, how do you feel? When you think of reading to learn about something you're interested in, how do you feel? What does literacy mean to you? How would your world be different if you could not read or write? How would your life change if you had no access to devices that allow you to connect through reading and writing? What aspects and individuals have influenced your relationship with reading and writing, and how? What are your clearest memories that include reading or writing in any form? What is your earliest memory of being read to, or of reading or writing? How have your experiences with literacy impacted who you are today? What is the best thing you've ever read? What is the best thing you've ever written? Think of something you read or wrote that had meaning to you and consider how it impacted you. What book or text impacts you most? Why? How are you impacted? How has your relationship with literacy shifted? How has literacy experiences shaped your identity? Once you have these signposts, take some time to sit with a few memories and dive deeper into yourself. Think of at least 5 experiences from any setting that involved any connection to reading or writing. Can you recognize any connections or patterns across the events? Perhaps you were with the same person or at the same place. Perhaps the texts you were reading or writing were connected by genre or audience or platform or story. Perhaps the reactions each text had on you were related. Maybe you read a book about a girl who loved the violin, and then you read your first piece of sheet music for full orchestra, and then you read your acceptance letter to music camp. Or maybe you read a highway sign that said you were now leaving Indiana, and days later you read a sign that said welcome to Florida, and hours later you read a sign that said University of South Florida. Don't feel like you need to come up with huge or dramatic events. Many of the events might feel trivial, which is absolutely fine. You read and write every day, and you have for a long time. You have already experienced more literacy events than most humans who've ever lived on Earth. Once you look at these experiences through the lens of literacy and investigate the impacts that they have had on you, connections and meanings can be found in places where you never realized they existed. Some of these connections might even come together to tell a good story. Assignment 5.1. Complete all 3 parts included in Assignment 5.1 and upload your considered and polished responses to Canvas. Number 1. Answer at least 5 of the thought-generating questions from the bullets above. Number 2. List at least 5 memorable events related to reading or writing that have had an impact on who you are and who you are becoming. Number 3. Find a connection between 3 of the events and write a sentence explaining the connection. 5.2. Outlining the literacy narrative. You have probably worked with an outline at some point in your academic career, and the idea might conjure images of Roman numerals or bullet points. When we talk about outlining, we do mean the physical act of structuring a research design, and you can use Roman numerals or bullet points or any schema or structure that works for you. But like writing, outlining is a process, not just a product. Outlining is a mental act as much as a physical artifact. When we outline our assignments, we are adding the step of thinking through and visualizing all the pieces of our product and all the steps of the process so that we can see where they are headed before we commit to a design. The process also allows us to arrange and rearrange pieces into the most effective order without the fear of losing our work along the way. Much of the work associated with learning takes place in our minds through a number of processes that can range from intentional and formal thinking to simply allowing thoughts about course concepts and content to run quietly through the back of our brains in search of connections. Both the purposeful and organic contemplations can produce ideas that pop up and out and into our consciousness at different points throughout the day and in different forms. The result of recognizing one of those good ideas that has been marinating in your mind can be to write a note to yourself or send an email to yourself or to tell your friend about your brilliant idea with the hopes that you will remember. All these acts are working as part of your outlining process. When we are aware of this process and pay attention to how it works in our minds and the lives, we can take an active role in optimizing the act and the outcome of outlining. The practice of outlining is connected to the practice of thinking critically and to the methods and approaches and terms related to the processes of research, design, and analysis. There are different ways to approach and structure the outlining process. All 3 of our major projects include an outline. In projects 2 and 3, we will also use a spreadsheet to create a grid so that we can visualize our sources, which will serve as an element of our outlining process. For your literacy narrative, the outlining process will serve as the explicit step of connecting your thoughts and ideas with the assignment in an effort to organize your design into a successful telling of your story to your audience. Adding thoughtful elements of design is necessary in any project, and trying to skip this step will generally result in spending more work on a product that is less successful. The narrative genre does allow for more freedom and creativity than other academic genres, but the conventions of formal academic writing are still expected. Although source material is not required, if it is included, it should be cited according to MLA format. In some way, we have all been impacted by written words or by writing words. Literacy can be about books, but it is about far more than that. Once you have thought of a few examples, see if you can find a connection across them. Or perhaps one experience is so defining and extensive that it can stand alone. As you continue to think of these experiences, try to remember sights, smells, and sounds. You are the main character in your literacy narrative, and your readers want to see how the main character developed as a result of the interaction with people in text and context. Your development is a real moral story of this story, and textual engagement is one of the motivating factors that contribute to your development. These considerations and a number of tasks you've completed earlier should help you construct an overarching statement that summarizes your relationship with literacy, the moral to your story. Your thesis will make a clear statement about your relationship with literacy, and your narrative will share the experiences that explain the statement. Your story is yours, and you can share as much or as little personal information as you would like. Work where you are comfortable, and remember that you have multiple audiences for this assignment. On some level, you are always writing for and to yourself. Because this is a graded assignment, you are writing for your instructor, who will have specific preferences, so don't forget to make choices and moves that tailor to your audience. And you will share parts of your story with your peers through attached assignments and discussions. You may also decide to upload your narrative to the DALN, which can be done with your name or anonymously. Reading the narratives on the DALN gives you an idea of many different approaches to writing a literacy narrative, and writing it for a course at USF also provides you with an audience you know has expectations, formal academic writing, and the associated conventions. As you think through these higher order considerations and the intellectual expectations of the assignment, also consider the details of the assignment. We know that part of fulfilling any assignment is understanding what it expects. Look closely at the concrete elements of the assignment early in your outlining process. You are to write 750 to 1,000 words. Depending on the font size, one page double-spaced is about 250 words and should form approximately 3 paragraphs. The literacy narrative, then, would call for approximately 3 to 4 pages, totaling approximately 9 to 11 paragraphs. An introduction and conclusion will take up 2 of those, leaving 7 to 9 paragraphs to weave your story. Think through how you want to allocate that space to tell your story. You probably know by now whether you tend to write long or short paragraphs, and knowing your writing style is an important part of planning your writing approach and developing your personal writing process. For instance, if you know that you write long paragraphs and are more likely to write over 1,000 words than under 750, you might want to plan your outline with 8 paragraphs, an introduction and conclusion with 6 paragraphs for the body. Or you could know that you are incredibly concise and should leave 9 paragraphs for your body. Students tend to write too much instead of too little, and it is easier to add than delete. So, if you're unsure, aim low. You can always add more imagery to build the story. Your introduction and conclusion will outline the paper and state your thesis. So those 6 to 9 paragraphs in the middle are where your outline develops and your story unfolds. Those paragraphs can tell one extended story, or can bring a few experiences together. For instance, if reading Harry Potter over an extended time helped you through the loss of a parent, and you want to write about that time in your life, perhaps you will need all 6 paragraphs. The structure we looked for when reading fiction can even be used to frame that one extended story by building your outline on the major plot points from your story. If you want to follow one extended event, make sure you can break it into a few clear points so that it works to progress across the plot. Or if you read a series over a number of years in different books aligned with different rites of passage in your life, focus on a few. Or mix up a few different things you read and wrote and connect them with a time and place or an outcome or meaning that tie to an overarching statement. More than 3 to 4 events would be hard to fill in the allocated space, but be sure to think through the layout before you start outlining. And recognize that while literacy is what holds the events together, the story is also about you and your experiences. Just make sure that literacy is a major character in the plot. We probably have a wide range of experiences with literacy, and while some students could write thousands of words about their stories, others might not feel that they have anything to say. One valuable outcome of constructing a defined narrative about our lives and experiences is that it allows us to see that who we are impacts our process of reading and writing and learning, and that who we are is valuable in academic settings. Writing a structured narrative also allows us to practice merging personal experiences and creativity with a structured academic assignment, being prepared for a specific purpose and audience. Recognizing that the assignment, genre, and audience impact the approach is a very important aspect of learning to write and communicate in ways that transfer across and beyond institutions, environments, and situations. For instance, while you may encounter assignments with instructions that explain why and when you would want to avoid using first-person point of view, it would be odd, if not impossible, for you to attempt a literacy narrative without the explicit inclusion of the stated voice of a main character, you in the form of I. Layout options. There are a number of ways to lay out your narrative. If clear events or text do not stick out to you right away, considering organizational approaches might help. And here are a few. Chronological, elementary, middle, high school, university. People, mom, brother, teacher, uncle, friend. Platform, book, online, social media, texting, email. Places, school, home, grandma's, the community center, church. Theme, joy, struggle, education, family. Genres, academic, sci-fi, fan fiction, personal communications. Subject, text, magic, Harry Potter, romance, Twilight, fantasy, Aragon. Classes, English, history, psychology, band. Types of reading, formal and informal, academic and entertainment, news and magazines. Phases, when you were into My Little Pony, then soccer, then Pokemon, then Billy, then... You could also follow a literary device to create a theme. Seasons, rain, dinner table. As you create your outline, you may combine any of these elements. When I was 10 and reading creepypasta at our dining room table. When I was 12 and reading a biology textbook at our dining room table. When I was 17 and reading my USF acceptance letter at our dining room table. These three experiences already share a connection to reading in a physical location, but how can they connect to an overarching theme that makes you the main character in a good story? As you look across those three events, what changed and what didn't? Who were you then and who were you? What will you be reading where and with whom years from now? Can these snapshots work together to tell a larger story? And don't forget what you know about stories. A narrative should tell an interesting story, which requires considering the elements of storytelling. An exposition will let us know where the story is situated. The rising action of your story might include a conflict in need of resolution. The climax might be the change in you. And while there is an end to your paper, it isn't the end of your story, so feel free to look forward in your denouement. Often it can seem that academic work is all research, and sources and that stories exist solely in another world or at least another genre. But genre lines blur, and it's valuable to practice writing across lines and genres and audiences. These shared spaces will be what you occupy and navigate in much of your writing life. Remember that there are a number of ways to arrange your events into a compelling story, so think through a few options before you pick or create the right choice for you. Whichever schema you apply should tie all the elements to a thesis. Thesis. The concrete elements of the paper are framed by the overarching intention of the assignment. To fulfill the assignment, be sure to create a thesis that introduces and frames how you discuss your relationship with literacy and describe the impact specific text and experiences have had on you. You cannot actually discuss and describe your relationship with literacy in one sentence, but you can provide a structure from which your story can emerge and ground your development as the main character. Your experiences with literacy will ground your story and serve as a through line, and the impact of those experiences should connect to form your thesis. Identifying the relevance of each experience and then connecting the impacts is one way to create a thesis. Here are some samples of emerging thesis statements that connect literacy events. Writing in my journal opened me to a love of writing that eventually merged with my love of drawing. Most of my reading is on screens, phone screens, video game screens, and laptop screens. All of my reading, however, connects me to the people on the other side of the screens who have made me who I am. My sister's love of reading has been the main influence in my literacy life. When I think of reading music and how music played a role in my relationship with my family, my education, and my partner. I never thought of myself as a reader until I realized how much time I spend reading and writing to my friends, and how those friends and those communications help me become who I am. My relationship with reading transitioned from joy to fear when the informal childhood texts of elementary school were replaced with the formal academic texts of high school, and when the joy left, so did my confidence. One line from the Hunger Games helped me get through moving and helped me develop the confidence to face my fear and find my freedom. I still haven't deleted the text she sent, and I still read it when I start to forget why I came to Tampa. Some of these statements stand alone, and others start a thread to be expanded, but all require support from a structured narrative that tells the story under the statement. Once you have a thesis and know what events or experiences you will share, start building an outline. Outlining is often associated with more formal writing that does not draw from personal experiences and does not include scholarly sources. But all formal writing requires outlining. If you have a thesis and plan to write 2 paragraphs each for the 3 events and then wrap it up with a conclusion, you already have your basic outline. Mapping your plan before you start writing allows you to weave threads that connect your story on multiple levels. Perhaps your first paragraph starts out with you in your dorm where you were doing homework for the assignment, which makes you think of your childhood bedroom where so much of your reading took place. And then you can state your thesis and dive into the 3 elements. At the end, you can tie it all back to your dorm and what you are reading now and where you hope to be in the future. After you have thought through your basic outline, begin the process of formalizing your formatted outline in writing, which should provide an overview of the topic of each paragraph in addition to your thesis. Your thesis will likely develop as you build your outline into a full story. If you plan to use source material, have it formatted and cited in MLA as part of your outline. Your instructor will provide information on how to tailor your outline for him, her, or them. The tasks throughout Project 1 have already started to develop content that you can fill your outline and feed your literacy narrative. So feel free to start with those tasks if you'd like. Or you can select new experiences that you thought of after the task, or that you now think will work together better to create a clear thesis and a compelling story. To start, just narrow down 3 main events or text and a thesis to connect them. Assignment 5.2. Upload a complete outline of your literacy narrative, including one overarching statement about your relationship with literacy and supporting life experiences that demonstrate that statement or discuss the impact. Your outline should be fully formatted in MLA, and your instructor will provide specific expectations.